Good morning. It's that time again where we're going to spend some time talking about the state of the college. It's sort of an overview of where we are. We do this twice a year, and there's some good news and there's some challenges ahead of us. One of the challenges is to get the audio to work, which I'm sure people will do here in just a second. The first thing I want to do is to welcome new members to our community. I think we have some new staff and some new faculty. If any of you are here in the audience, I'd ask you to stand up for just a second so you can be recognized. Welcome. Well, before we get started with this, I'd like to point out that we have a conflict with an event that's going on in the dining hall right now, the new startups. So there are a number of students over there for good reason. It's an unfortunate thing that our calendar didn't catch the conflict in time, and it's very difficult to avoid all conflicts, and it's getting even harder as we get bigger. So I apologize for the conflict there. There's some other challenges that we've had this spring, as you might know. A lot of things have happened. For example, snow. You might have noticed I think there's more snow on the ground for a longer period of time in Boston than has been in many, many years. It's something like the 5th longest period on history, which is easy to see as you drive around the town. I'd like to go through a series of issues really quickly and leave some time at the end for questions. And the first one is our strategic plan. The college had a plan developed in 2007. It's a 5-year plan that goes to 2012. It had laid out a strategy for making new investments in the college, and then the financial crisis hit. And we had to interrupt the plan and the investments in order to deal with the financial sustainability issues, and it's sort of been on the back burner for several years. As a result of the Financial Sustainability Committee's report from the trustees last spring, we decided to reinstate the goals that we had developed in 2007. And so an update, but a very sort of minor administrative update is underway, which basically amounts to a cover letter on the 2007 plan. It says we're reaffirming the general goals here and recommitting to the investments that we had suggested before. In fact, the most significant suggestions in that plan were to add faculty positions without adding new students in order to strengthen the base. And our new multi-year financial model for the school includes budgeting for 4 new faculty positions with no new increases in enrollment, and that's assuming all of the financial models that you'll see going forward, and we believe that that's a sustainable outcome. So that's underway. There are some key elements here. If you were here back in 2007, remember the 2 main themes on the plan were to strengthen the base, because we were afraid we were stretched pretty thin. And the second one is to reach for the future, and those were big ideas that were contingent on our ability to find new investment from someone outside of our community. So the just-in-case sort of big ideas. We are reviewing and revising the list of potential big ideas as we now know a little more about who those investors might be. We know a little more about what their ideas and goals might be, so we're a little better at tuning it. One of those big ideas, by the way, was to reach out and to influence a lot of people at other institutions with the Olin learning model. That has, of course, led us to develop I2E2, the Initiative for Innovation in Engineering Education, a little over a year ago. And we're now contemplating, let's say, in a very serious way, a new challenge for the school. Very much in line with what we've been doing before. We think we can attract support from outside the college to help fund it, and that is to, let me just say for now, improve the education of 10,000 engineering students in the next 5 years. Now, that does not mean that we're going to enroll 10,000 engineering students here in Needham. It means that we hope we're going to influence the teachers of engineering students on other campuses who will then make important changes in their learning model, which are inspired by Olin's approach, probably quite different in context. That's already underway, as you know, at Illinois, where they now have 300 students enrolled just this fall in an Olin-inspired curriculum. There are similar projects underway in Singapore and in other places around the world. So we're simply committing ourselves to try to do this deliberately, to try to define what it means to be influenced and inspired by Olin, and to try and count. Because I believe there are a lot of constituencies in this country who care about this mission, who believe that change is needed, not just on your own campus, and very few other schools are willing to make such a commitment. So this is something that's underway at Olin in the strategic planning area. You might also know that we've had a number of visitors recently to campus who are candidates for the open position of provost and dean of faculty. The search process is nearing an end. The committee has just this week sent me a letter with their evaluation of the candidates that were here, and we hope very soon to be able to make an announcement on this. So stay tuned. Hopefully this will be very good news and very soon. Endowment. Okay, this is basically good news. The 2011 fiscal year results to date, performance has increased. The investment return rate for the endowment has grown substantially in the last year. It's at 13.57% positive. And the current value of the endowment as of December 31st was $370 million. As of January 31st, it grew a bit. It's now $373 million. So you can see this thing is growing, even though we're having to spend from it, of course, to continue operations of the school. Recovery seems to be well underway, and if you're notice that, there we go, this comes and goes. I never did really believe in electrons. All the asset classes in the endowment are performing well. This was not the case a year or two ago, but it is now, and we're hopeful that this will continue. But the trailing average values will continue to decline and impact us for future years. We're really not out of the woods yet. Though if you've been in this auditorium before thinking about this, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you draw a graph of the value of our endowment, you get this blue line, which it reflects a lot of things. The rate at which the foundation transferred money to the college wasn't uniform. They didn't just give us a check at the beginning and walk away. There are also investment returns. There are changes in the way the investment was handled. There are changes in the market. So you see the blue line, which is moving up and down. The red line is the 12-quarter average of the blue points to the left of it. Each dot on the red line is the average of the 12 most adjacent blue dots to the left. And as you can see, the red line is moving down, and the red line is what determines how much we can spend from the endowment. Now, in the next couple of fiscal years, it's easy to see why the amount available to spend is not increasing. The blue dots in the oval to the upper left will fall off of our moving average in the fiscal year 2012, which is about to come up. And then in the following fiscal year, you can see we lose a few more high values, and then it'll begin to start moving up again. One really important fact from this graph, though, that I hope no one will miss, is if you look at the extreme right edge, for the first time in a long time, the blue dots and the red dots are going to cross, right? When the red dots are when the blue dots are above the red dots, we finally get to the point where there's some lift in this system that's going to help turn around the decline and eventually make the red line go back up. So I'm going to use that as a good excuse to buy a bottle of champagne and celebrate. It may already have crossed. I'm trying to get Steve to tell me it's okay to tell you that they're on top of each other, and he's, you can see him shaking his head. But he says by March, it'll happen. Well, we're already halfway through February. So we've been looking at this graph for the last couple of years. You can see why the college still has tough budget years ahead, but there's good reason to hope. By the way, as far as budget is concerned, we're projecting to be significantly under budget again. By the way, that's not an accident. That requires a lot of hard work. It's a good thing that we're going to be under budget. Steve's future employment in the college, I think, depends on that, and so does mine. We don't go back to the board and report that we overspent. That doesn't happen. It's very hard to stay close to that line without overspending or else having a whole lot in surplus. The reason that we're going to be under budget at the end of the year has to do largely with factors that are actually beyond our control this year. In the first place, for example, debt service. The college mortgage payments, just like families make mortgage payments. We have about $160 million in debt. If you total up all the mortgage payments, it's about a quarter of our operating expense. So when that debt goes up and down, our monthly budget goes up and down too. We had to assume last year as we moved forward. Is it working now? Okay. This will keep you on your toes because you'll never be sure whether you can hear what I'm going to say. So if I could just get it to be quiet when the difficult parts come up. So anyway, we had to guess that interest rates would increase during the past year. There's an awful lot of discussion about inflation. Look, the country is spending money like it's like you could print it for nothing. Eventually, this is going to lead to inflation. So we had to guess what will the interest rates be this year and budget for it so that it wouldn't sink our ship in the middle of the year. Well, we budgeted for it, and guess what? The interest rates are still quite low. So that this interest rate rise hasn't started yet, and as a result, that money hasn't been spent in the budget. The other thing that helped us was the low natural gas prices, which is also something we have to sort of bet on at the beginning of the year, what will happen to the utility expenses going forward. And we were saved somewhat by lower than expected natural gas prices. So that's the primary reason why our budget is going to end up in the black this year. It changes every year. Being under budget this year helps us to return funds to the endowment and demonstrate to the board that we're fiscally responsible and hopefully get their blessing on being able to go through the next 2 fiscal years, which are going to be hit hard by that declining endowment. You saw the red line that's going down. We have to budget next year the same size school, but we can take less from the endowment. So that means that we'll likely look for a little bit of deficit spending in fiscal 12 and 13. Deficit spending, by the way, means basically that we spend more than 6% of the endowment value. If it's less than 6%, we call it okay. If it's more than 6%, we call it in the red zone. And it takes some special actions on the part of the board to enable us to do that. In these 2 years, fiscal 12 and 13, we've never spent over 6%. And these 2 years look like we'll be just slightly over, maybe 6.1 or 6.2, something like that, in order to balance. We'd love to avoid that. So we're deeply now involved in the budget development process for the next fiscal year. The whole thing has to be approved at the May board meeting. We're, as I just mentioned, predicting some small deficits in FY 12 and 13. But great progress has been made in reducing the size of these. This is a really interesting process to watch. We start, looking in the crystal ball months in advance, estimating what we think things are going to cost, run out the numbers, and it says, oh, you're going to be $2 million in the red. And since we only have a little over a $30 million budget, that's a pretty good size deficit. But then as the months get closer and everybody sharpens their pencil and we avoid expenses and we defer things, that 2 million deficit turns out to be closer to 1 million. And then the 1 million turns into 400,000. And we're hoping, because we still have a little more time, that we'll be able to find ways to get the deficit down so that when we end the budget year next year, it will still be below 6% spending rate and not actually have been a deficit at the end. This is kind of our trajectory. It's a messy thing. It's sort of like watching sausage get made. You know, nobody can predict exactly where everything is going to be at the end. The preliminary budget was discussed with the Trustee Finance and Facilities Committee last week, actually, and the final budget will be approved by the trustees in May, so that's our cycle. This is clearly on everyone's mind. The FY13 budget, though, which still seems like it's far out there, is a challenge. And you can see the one thing we know is that that red line is not going to move very quickly, and it's heading down, and so we have to deal with a reduction in the amount of money we can spend out of the endowment. There are two ways to close every budget gap. One way is to cut expenses, and the other way is to find new sources of revenue. And I would much rather find new sources of revenue rather than deteriorate the quality of our programs on campus in order to get through the budget. Okay, that second method, finding new sources of revenue, is what we call development or fundraising, and we have a very strong program underway. For example, there have been significant increases this year over where we were last year in fundraising, even though we were very pleased with the way things were going last year during the recession. For example, we've had a 21% increase in the number of total gifts at the school. The participation rate at the school, which is our strongest arguing point when we go to visit foundations and companies, because if your own community doesn't invest in you, why should they invest in you? These rates are really quite strong. In fact, alumni participation as of December 31 was already at 42%. In December 31 the previous year, it was only 6%. Now, alumni have come around, as you know. They're over like 86% or 87% by the end, which is June 30, but they're making investments earlier, halfway through the year. We already have 40-some% of them, which I think is an enormous effort on the part of the alumni, and we're very grateful for. Parents similarly increased from 34% to 52% this year. And even alumni parents went up from 33 to 38% in the percentage of the parents who have made a gift by December 31. Now, you might remember that in the depths of the financial crisis, Tom Krimmel and his crew said, you know, never waste a good crisis. It's time to go out now and to ask for financial help. So we launched a capital campaign to try and raise money. And as of December 31st, that campaign has accumulated a total of slightly over $3 million in support. Now, that's a significant amount. I mean, it doesn't sound like a huge amount when you compare it to Harvard or these large schools, but we're a small school. In fact, if you were to just translate what does that mean at Olin to a school, say, the size of Babson next door, that's equivalent to about a $26 million campaign raise during the depth of the reception. And I know from board, they would love to be able to raise $25 million in 18 months or so. It's a substantial amount of money. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of the campaign plan, the multi-year scholarship and innovation campaign, it really has 3 phases. The first phase we are finished with, began in July of 2009. We focused primarily on trustees. We had a goal of trying to raise $2 million from these trustees. And remember who the trustees are. There's a total of 15 of them. These are people, none of whom graduated from Olin. They all graduated from some other school. They get involved in making decisions here and being responsible for them, even legally responsible for them. If we make a mistake, they have to answer for it. And for all of this extra responsibility, they get the privilege of reaching in their pocket and writing us a personal check. Okay? So they made us $2 million in gifts from these 15 people. Then on March 31 last year, we decided to begin the phase 2, which is to try and extend beyond that $2 million by reaching out primarily on parents and alumni parents. And we've raised another $1 million from them. We have another 2 to go to reach our goal of $3 million from that segment. And when we get to $5 million total from alumni and this internal approach, we don't know exactly when that will be, but whenever we do, our plan is to go public with this, make a big announcement, target all constituencies, corporations, foundations, everybody to join us, and set the magnitude of the goal, the total goal, which obviously will be larger than $5 million. And we don't know what that will be until we have all the data in front of us to make a better estimate. So this is the sort of overview, and if you have questions on this, I'm sure Tom would be glad to answer them. This process is pretty well understood at most universities, and what we're doing is not unusual, I think, in that regard. The class of 2010, okay? You might remember them. This hasn't been that long ago since they were sitting in the auditorium. They're now out doing other things. In fact, we did a survey after 6 months, which we do every year, and the results for this class show that almost 60% of them are employed somewhere. At least that's what they tell us. This is their primary activity, is they're employed. They may also be going to school or other things. Probably they say, I'm working. 38% of them told us that our primary activity is being a graduate student. They may also be working too. And that left a total of 3% that told us that they were seeking employment. That's a pretty significant result, considering that the unemployment rate in the U.S. is still at about 10%. And these folks are out trying to get a job without any experience yet in a market which is very conservative. So we think this is a very good outcome. I hope you do too. The average salaries, by the way, for all the students in the class of 2010, excluding those who were on internships, was a little over $62,000. Admission. We're now almost to begin the first of 3 candidates' weekends. I'm sure that hasn't escaped your attention. Very important process for us. Last year, we were quite worried about the number of applications, particularly because the price of admission to Olin now is higher than it has been in the past. And we began some very focused efforts to try to increase the size of the applicant pool. It turns out that those efforts were quite successful, and in 1 year, we increased the total size of the applicant pool by about 35%. Not only did the applicant pool grow, but the diversity and the quality grew as well. It's really a very strong group. I think Charlie can correct me, but I think the percentage of women grew substantially over the year before, and the percentage of underrepresented minority candidates grew by multiples of what they were before in the candidate pool. They're still not large numbers for minorities, but it's certainly moving in the right direction, something that we pay a lot of attention to try to increase diversity. This is what the applicant pool size has looked like since Olin's inception, actually. And you can see this class of 2015 is a lot larger than it was the year before, and that's a direct result of the efforts we made to increase the applicant pool. And you can see what the applicant pool size looked like last year at this time, and the trend that generated with the previous years, and why we became very concerned and made some investments there to turn it around. We're pleased, very pleased with this direction. I don't think we're there yet. I personally think, and I've talked with Charlie about this, we have a goal to get to 1,000 applications as soon as we can. When we get to 1,000, I think we have a lot more opportunity to deal with issues like diversity and other kinds of dimensions to the student population that we're looking for. And so that's our goal as we move forward. Candidates weekends, this Friday. We have 210 candidates that are expected to show up for these, about 70 each weekend. They come from 32 states and 8 countries. The total class size target, which is sometimes not exactly easy to hit right on the nose, is 84, and 18 of the deferred students from last year have already assured us that they're on the way. So we don't actually need an additional 84 students out of these candidates' weekends. we need 66. So it's going to be a very selective process this year. It's always a selective process, but the numbers make it even more challenging than usual. And by the way, this is the most powerful tool that Olin has, Candidates Weekend. It's the ability to get to know people personally, to see their classmates, to find out what the culture is like at Olin. This is what makes Olin what it is, and this is the secret weapon that Olin has in the admission process. It wouldn't work without everybody here participating, and I know that the next 3 weekends you have lots of other things that you could be doing, and you know, I just can't thank you enough for your commitment to making this work. This is actually an investment in our future for all of us. Scholarship policy. Every year the board has to review what the size of the scholarship will be in the following year. The board took this up again at their November meeting this fall. Given that the endowment is still in a nosedive and financial issues for the next 2 years in particular are likely to result in a deficit, they decided to extend the 50% scholarship to the class that will be entering in the fall of 2012. So they're doing this sort of 1 year at a time, monitoring what's possible and what's not. And so we're holding the line, doing exactly the same as we've done for the last 2 years. And that's the policy of the board. NEASC accreditation. What is NEASC? The New England Association of Schools and Colleges. It's a regional group that accredits all of the schools in New England, including Harvard, MIT, and Yale, Dartmouth, and all that, but also high schools and trade schools, all of us. And every 10 years, we're supposed to be under an accreditation review. But since Olin is special, it's brand new, we get to do it more times than everybody else. This is the 3rd time we've done an accreditation review since 2004. We have never failed to exceed expectations when we come out. This time, I'm told, if we do as well as we have in the last 2 reviews, we will qualify for 10 years of accreditation, and we won't have to come back again until a long time from now. Okay? The self-study has been, this is a really big project to create the self-study, and there's been a team of people here writing and rewriting and reviewing and checking numbers for months. This big book on Olin has been finished and has been distributed. There'll be a copy of it posted to the community so that everyone here can read what we said about the school. The NEASC visiting team will be here at the end of March. It's a really excellent team, by the way. The leader of this will be the president of Middlebury College, Ron Leibovitz, who's a wonderful leader in academia. And one of the team members I happen to know is the Dean of Engineering from Dartmouth. So we have a good team that's used to seeing very high quality programs, and they'll be here not just to carry a clipboard around and say, gotcha, you should have done that differently, but to be advisors, to help us learn about best practice at other institutions. This could be a feedback mechanism that will help our institution get better. That's really what we need to be thinking about. The committee that did most of this work is listed on this slide here, and we all owe them a great debt for their energy and effort. Now, I've been on a number of these reviews myself for other institutions. In fact, I think in the last year I've chaired 2 of them, one of them at New England Conservatory of Music and another one at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. And I can tell you what happens when you're on the other side of the table and they're here to visit. You're trying to find out whether the institution has done enough self-analysis that it really knows who it is and what its problems are, and that it's paying attention to them. So they'll be here to listen at the water cooler, at the dining hall, to find out what's on your mind. And they want you to be honest. Tell them the good and the bad, everything that's going on. And we hope that the self-study has caught all of those major themes, and there are no surprises. That's the real thing that we're hoping for. That when they come, that we will have told them, we're concerned about these issues, we're working on them. Sustainability, for example, is an issue. We've made some investments, we're not done, we have more to do. And that when they talk to people, they'll hear sustainability, that's our issue, that's one of the things we're concerned about. You can put a check in the box. They're paying attention. they're working on it. So your participation here and welcome them, help them to know that we're aware and that this is important to us and we care about the NEASC evaluation. Michael Moody, almost 1 year ago. I wrote a letter to the community recently expressing how I felt on the anniversary of Michael's passing away. I have to believe that if Michael were here, there are a lot of things that he'd be proud of that have happened in the last year, mostly because of the efforts and the achievements of the people in this room. Michael will always be an important part of our community. His contributions, I think, are institutionalized in ways that no one could dictate from any seat. And I just wanted to remind you that it's been 1 year. And hopefully as we move forward, we'll continue to make him proud of the sort of achievements that the school has made. And that's from inside the Oval. Now, if we look outside, how does Olin interact with the rest of the world? Well, first, there is this three-college partnership, Babson, Olin, and Wellesley, which continues to generate a fair amount of growing energy and awareness and opportunity. The efforts continue to develop this. There are 3 college partnership committees now forming on all 3 campuses. There were some very active intercession projects that took place. A group, again, of students from all 3 campuses organized and worked on, I believe, pedagogies for learning during the last intercession period in January. And the results from that were really amazing, as we saw last year when they worked on Grand Challenge issues. The students who've been involved continue to tell us that this is a possibly transformative experience and that we need to find ways to capitalize on this and to make more opportunities to do this available. We also had a faculty workshop in which I believe our own faculty contributed essentially their January retreat time to join that included 60 faculty members from all 3 campuses. That's an amazing number. In fact, I was meeting with the other presidents recently, and we all realized there probably isn't anything at all that we could have done to get 60 faculty members to volunteer to meet in January to do something together. There's almost no incentive that would make that happen from the outside. I have to believe this is evidence of some genuine curiosity and interest in working together. There is, by the way, a study underway at Harvard University on collaborations between institutions, and they have sort of singled out this Babson-Olin-Wellesley collaboration as a role model that they are deeply interested in exploring. So you'll wind up reading about this one day as well. There's a website for the 3 colleges that's under development, so you should expect soon to see some material there, which we hope will attract a lot of attention. There's a sustainability certificate program still underway, one of the first of what we hope will be a series of educational opportunities that could not be achieved by any campus alone, but are enabled by the 3 colleges. By the way, Joanne Kasuth has been appointed the Associate Director. I think I already reported last fall that Adele Wolfson from Wellesley has been appointed the Director of this 3-college partnership, all 3 campuses. And we have decided to move this a little bit along in the governance area so that it has more than just who do they report to, their own presidents. And we're forming a board to monitor and to support the activities of all 3 colleges. Will be a 6-person board that involves the 3 presidents and the 3 board chairs. So that's where this group will be formed. And we hope that will allow us to move the goalpost every once in a while when we need to in order to achieve things, and also possibly to attract donors that no one school could attract by itself. In the fall, we had a number of media events that raised the visibility of Olin. One of these was the digital town hall. I'm sure you saw the email and the announcements on our own website about this. I was personally just very proud of the performance of the Olin team, the students and faculty that were involved in this. Just to be identified as the only college in America to be invited into the conversation with the U.S. Secretary of Education, with the head of the OECD, and with Tom Friedman from the New York Times is really an interesting event. It's not something that we lobbied to do. We were contacted and asked to be involved. This particular event led to a quote, which we think is pretty significant, where Tom Friedman says, "We ought to clone Olin College 1,000 times over." It would be very hard to get him to do that if you wrote and asked him specifically to do that. But he did this on his own in front of the rest of the world, which we were very grateful for. External recognition. The Society of Women Engineers continues to exceed expectations and turn heads all over the country. I've run into engineering deans and administrators at many venues who know Olin College primarily because of our SWE program, Society of Women Engineers, which is really amazing. I understand that the meeting was last fall, maybe almost 30 of our students attended, and I heard that 8 of the top 10 positions, there must be, I'll bet you the rules get changed after this, were taken by Olin students, as well as a number of national awards, which is great. And Rachel Stedman, are you in the audience, Rachel? She's in the startup group. See, I knew there would be a conflict. Rachel is the first college student and youngest trustee ever, or director ever, to be invited to serve on the board for SWE. So another first for the school, which we thought was great. Olin co-sponsored the Engineer of the Future 3.0 conference at the University of Illinois at Urbana in November. And again, the participation of Olin faculty and Olin students was just tremendous. It really represented the school well and moved, I think, a lot of other institutions who were there visiting to think more deeply about education and learning. There was obviously a prominent piece about Olin in the November Wall Street Journal, which tended to fill my inbox through Thanksgiving. I think I don't even remember Thanksgiving, actually. There were just pages and pages of single-spaced explanations to people who wrote and were intrigued by this, let's say. I think there were lots of opinions about this. Few of them, I think, were really understanding what happens at the school, but we did get a lot of attention, and most outcomes, I believe, overall were positive. There are a lot of people who know about Olin today because of this sort of media attention, even though it's controversial, and even though those of us inside the school feel often that it doesn't accurately portray the role that tenure plays, for example, in Olin's future. Nevertheless, the boldness of what Olin is doing and the fact that Olin is willing to stand up and make a commitment to things that are beyond self-interest has turned an awful lot of heads and I think served us very well. We will have new investors, I believe, as a result of that kind of attention. Michael Taylor from the class of '06 was identified by Mass High Tech magazine as on the Women to Watch list. This is another first for Olin. We're watching for it. There'll be a lot more Olin alumni to see her already making an impact. Sponsored programs. Another milestone for Olin. There is this National Science Foundation program, the STEM STEP program, STEM Talent Expansion Program competition. I think there are about 10 major proposals around the U.S. that are invited to compete. Olin has for $10 million. Now, obviously, this is not just for Olin. Olin is the hub of a community of universities around the U.S. that would participate in this, but Olin is certainly taking the lead. That proposal, I know what it takes to put together a proposal that size. That proposal at any university, at Harvard, at Stanford, would have made the lights go dim for some people in order to get it together. And our team, led by Mark Somerville, but also Lynn Stein and others, just did a spectacular job. In my view, whether or not we win, we've already won. Okay, the relationships that have been built, the recognition for the school in being a leader is just tremendous. By the way, aside from the sort of normal process of sending proposals to NSF for peer review, I keep getting pestered by a couple of people that show up in my office frequently. Drew Bennett and Dave Barrett. Could probably. They keep catching me as I'm going to the bathroom or dropping into the dining hall. Just for a second, I'd like to tell you that, you know, some Defense Department group called me up and they said there's another $100,000 contract that they'd like to send to Olin. You know, I just thought you might be interested. This just sort of happens on a regular basis. I think that there is growing recognition for the strength of our robotics team as well, and also the SCOPE program, which we need to embrace and to find ways to emphasize and build into the culture of the school. It's obviously succeeding at a rate which is beyond expectations. Outreach. I2E2. With the leadership of Lynn, I2E2 has firmly established itself in the school, demonstrated that there is a strong interest outside of the college for the kind of co-creation and inspiration that Olin faculty are able to provide, and the students as well, to help change engineering education on a large scale. So I think the proof of concept phase is behind us. It's now a matter of building a business plan and seeing if we can keep up with all the opportunities that are being generated, which is just spectacular. I think this will increase Olin's footprint on a global scale in ways that nothing else could. Stanford University will be here on March 8th. They've already sent us a list of who's coming, besides the Dean of Engineering, the Chairman of Electrical Engineering, the Chairman of Mechanical Engineering, the Chairman of Chemical Engineering, one of the key leaders in the design school, the D School at Stanford, the Stanford Technology Ventures Program Director. It's a very powerful team. I mean, Stanford is a school that doesn't need help, okay? We could learn a lot from them showing up on our campus, and I'm just elated that they are going to spend time to come back here to investigate what's happening at Olin, and I hope that we can find ways to develop relationships with them so that both campuses grow by learning from the other. That's the kind of strategic partner that could lead to opportunities in the future that could change our culture completely. By the way, just so that you'll know, there's a lot of conversations going on about Olin in the international world. These are exciting. They also might be distractions, so we have to be careful about them. There are, for example, conversations underway with Abu Dhabi, Brazil, China, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Korea, and other places as well. Some of these involve invitations for Olin to participate in creating an entirely new university. It's kind of exciting, but also threatening from a business plan point of view, something we have to be very careful about. But in today's financial world, with our endowment having dropped and forced us to make major changes in our model, I feel it's my obligation to not leave any stone unturned, to see firsthand what it is that the opportunity might hold for Olin and how this might help us both from an academic growth point of view and also from a financial point of view. A lot of these visitors are capable of making major investments. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars of investments in a program that they care about. You have to be careful about this. Those kinds of investments can warp you into directions you don't want to go. I'm very aware of that. But we have to at least ask. We have to have the conversations and see where it leads. So you should know these things are happening. There's a number of people from Olin that are traveling around. We'll have visitors here just evaluating what the future might hold. I think that covers the main events. This might be a little bit grandiose for a college our size, but I do think that the state of the college is quite strong, and I'm very pleased to be here.